'56 in February is when I joined my first major corporate employer, Burroughs Corporation. The time as a patent attorney was interesting. They call you a patent agent. Patent examiner is the better term, while you're working for the government, because you have not yet gotten your law degree, but yet you have all of the engineering skills, and then they teach you everything you need to know about patents. And I assimilated very quickly. And it did not take very long before I fortunately, just luckily, was assigned to a technology within the patent office. I was assigned computers. And there weren't any computers then. There, of course, had been beginnings of it. Prior to this time, everything was done by relays. Your telephone switching systems, your railroad switching systems were relays, and relays are on-off. One of my programs was to examine a portion of the ENIAC machine, the world's first electronic computer. Electronic meaning great big vacuum tubes and it filled the room. And there was no background. My chief examiner that I worked with was a specialist in the switching industry, telephone switching, railroad switching. And so he transferred that background, that knowledge, into computer switching, where your little paths would decide, yes, no, I go this path or I go a different path. And so some of the things that usually what you would do in an advanced technology is you would find that somebody comes in with a camera. I have a new camera and it's got a shutter that does this. And so you would then compare it to earlier patents that had been issued to other people that essentially did the same thing. And then the newcomer would be told, yes, you have a patentable invention, or we can give you one, but it's very narrow in terms of scope of protection. So there was no, what they call prior art. There was no prior art to find in the computer industry other than publications by these great inventors that were part of the beginnings of the industry. It was a very, just a fortunate time in my life that I came along at a time when I grew up with the whole beginnings of the computer industry. And that's what actually switched me to decide to go to Burroughs eventually, because Burroughs had been an adding machine company. They were the first adding machine, William Seward Burroughs, the inventor of the first adding machine in 1880s, and they evolved through their history to mechanical advancements, to calculators, to electronics, and then to their own computer business. So it was kind of a natural find for me. When we had children, they were unbelievably great together. Ted he never did anything wrong. He was a jewel, and it worked out to be fun for Doris and I, and actually fun for Amy, because the relationship between the two of them was just marvelous. I got very active in my business, and so was not really a part of their daily life, except in the evenings and weekends. And one of the things that we invented was a predecessor of the panel television that you now have, or the panel plasma screens that are in computers. But it started out as little indicator tubes. We called them the Nixie tube. And it had a series of segmented wires inside the tube with a series of leads that would come out. You could select numbers from 0 to 9. That became worldwide accepted in terms of a use in a calculator, where the calculators started out being mechanical, but we wanted to have a display rather than a printout. And so we would have a bank of these individual Nixie tubes, and they would light up and give you the answers to what your calculator came up with. So while I worked at Burroughs, I headed the patent department in '65. I also became an assistant secretary for the corporate secretary, a man named Sheldon Hall. He headed the legal department at that time. I decided that I really ought to know more about corporate law while I was very happy with patent law. And so I went back to night school, and I went to Wayne State Law School and got a master's degree in law. You know, I approached 36 years, and so I had half that time as a patent attorney and half of that time as a VP and corporate secretary. And the secretary part was great. I worked under 4 different presidents. The worst one was the last chairman of the company, W. Michael Blumenthal, who was the Secretary of Treasury for 2 years under Jimmy Carter. The fact that I grew up in the Depression years, I think influenced my life, and probably Ted and Amy's as well, in that it formed our ability to decide that we really wanted to get ahead. We really wanted to have a successful life. We wanted to have good ethics, and I think all of that flowed. And you know, I look at some of the younger children and the newer generations that don't have that strict background influence that caused a work ethic. I'll say work ethic is a good phrase. I grew up in the computer industry. That has to be a major factor in what has happened in my field of interest. And the fact that they've gone through miniaturization to start from a huge room that was the computer with great big vacuum tubes in it, and that's what I knew in radar was vacuum tubes, to come down to semiconductor fields where everything is so miniaturized now that that technology has advanced to a degree that you can do anything in almost no space. I'm afraid of diseases, not that I have any. I'm so fortunate I'm roughly age 80. I haven't had any diseases. I expect to reach 81, and indeed, if nothing comes along, I might go along for a few more years. In terms of family and friends, I just hope they all remember me as not being a bad guy. That's about it.